here we are, back again for another episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, episode number 157, being recorded on Monday, March 31st, 2025 at 6:24 p.m. And it is a chilly day. It was chilly in the morning. It was warmish in the afternoon. People had the windows rolled down, but there was still that creeping undercurrent of cool to let you know that it's not quite t-shirt weather yet. So you better be still wearing those jackets when you go out. Make sure you are defrosting your car in the morning. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time for your car to warm up. And to drive safely on the road in the morning. You don't know where there's going to be some patches of ice with the sun that's not fully out to melt it. So it's very easy to kind of get distracted and it kind of hides on you. What is that? Black ice that you can't see. So just be careful out there. It's going to be, well, I guess technically spring now. I don't know when spring actually started, so to speak. First day of spring was on last week, actually. Was on March 20th. No, not last week. I'm sorry. It was 2 weeks ago, 20th or the 21st. And the seasons kind of do their own thing. Mother Nature kind of does its own thing. The starting and ending days are completely moot, so to speak. It's more of a transitional period from warmer day or from cooler days to warmer days, and back and forth. So, and staying focused and staying vigilant regardless. The spring and the summer will get people trying to pull you out of your house to do this and do that, but you just stay vigilant and you stay firm in what it is that you want to do. And because there's so much to do, there's always so much to do. I can't emphasize that enough. The amount of films to be watched, books to be read, writing to be accomplished. We just can do only so much. We got to prioritize our time, you know. Somebody else said it, and I thought it was very poignant. They said, "There's no such thing as time management." It is, oh gosh, now how embarrassing. I'm trying to remember what they said, and I almost immediately forgot. They said, well, it's not time management, it's what you do. I don't know, something like that, man. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You get the point, though. Just keep an eye on what you're doing, man. Just make sure you're spending the right time you need, or the designated time that you need on whatever it is you need to do. In this case, I got so many films to watch. There's so many books to be read. I have so much writing to do. And it is up to me and me alone to schedule that timing so I have the proper time for each of the tasks at hand. And it is a daily task. It's 168 hours in a week. So, at that point, it's 168 hours, right? How embarrassing if there's not. Oh my gosh, it actually is 168 hours. So, oh my gosh, here I am dropping things. So, it's just good to get an idea of when you need to eat, when you need to sleep, when you need to get the job done. And that time in between. So let's say you're not sitting there at a computer and you're not writing at that moment. Well, what if you're listening to something that inspires you, or you're rattling, an idea in your head you're trying to fully develop? Sometimes I'll be listening to a piece of music and I have a whole scenario in my head of just like, wow, what if I do this and what if I do that, with the backdrop of this music as a spine to the whole idea. I was writing recently, and I fairly recently, there's a project that I'm actually finishing up, was just actually working on before I started recording it, but a project that I was finishing up writing, has to be edited is all, but a song came on that I had never even heard of before, and I said, my gosh, this is exactly the mood and the tone and the sort of tempo that I'm going for in the context of this piece of writing. And my gosh, man, it's just, so even if I'm not sitting there writing out exactly, it's still like, man, I hear that song and I'm like, yes, it's coming together, man. So, even if you're not always pen to paper, or you're not always, strumming along at a guitar, maybe you're listening just to your favorite rock band or whatever, and you're like, man, I want to look up how that guitarist does this crazy trick, or, does this solo or whatever. Maybe you want to, look at this painter, and oh, how do they blend these colors, well to make it kind of this sort of style. So it's all about just being focused on the work, man. That's what we kind of like preach here, sort of like getting the job done, fulfilling life's goals and life's ambitions to the fullest that we can, and just really leading a meaningful and productive life, and doing so the time that you are allotted. So. I don't normally do this on the microphone, but I am going to open up this can of delicious Dr. Pepper, and because it doesn't go through the microphone well, it's gonna spark your ears, man. I tell you. But that'll be well drank during the duration of this episode. Let's talk briefly about a contemporary film. I won't go too much into this because it's better to be seen and draw your own conclusions from. Let's talk about, get the director right here, director Carson Lund, also co-written by Michael Basta and Nate Fisher, talking about the new film Eephus, about one day in the 90s, the last day of this baseball field at Soldiers Field in, I forgot where it was in Massachusetts, but don't you worry, I'm going to get the name of the area right here in Douglas, Massachusetts. And it is about the final game in the middle of the day, starting off, going throughout this day, I should say, a lot of older guys, and this was a film that it's interesting. I've heard it compared to, immediately I've heard the comparison to like Return of the Secaucus 7 by John Sayles, and I guess there is that to an extent. I mean, the term hangout film has been kind of more in line, has been more seemingly in the general kind of vocabulary in the past couple of years, and at least from what I've seen in the general discourse among acquaintances, to talk about films that where you're getting a real kind of feel for these characters, and it's less concerned about the plot. I mean, you can talk about like a lot of those mumblecore movies I was talking about, to a certain extent, are certainly hangout films, varying, if the plot is very light. Because with this, you have these group of guys, and they all are kind of stretching out this one final baseball game and the camaraderie between them. And what's interesting about this film that I think was really solid is that it feels like a realistic look at what a final game here would be like. There's not a lot of while there are a lot of comedic quips that you would see in a screenplay, the dialogue doesn't entirely feel natural in the way where in real life you would have characters speaking over each other, or you would have more kind of general conversations like that were leaking out from other places. So if, like, say two characters are in, we're having a conflict, or are we're talking about something last week, they wouldn't still be talking about it here in the movie, but in real life you would. It's sort of like, oh man, boss at work is really, you're in the middle of a job unless you do this, whatever. But here it all works because it's not a nostalgic sort of, oh man, this one last big final game and everything went well. And because what's interesting is that the film really intentionally kind of drags on with this game that almost will not end, no matter the weather that is against them, or the sun going down. It's almost like, for better or for worse, even if these people don't want to be a part of it anymore, they are sort of grasping onto keeping a hold of this baseball game. And it's a lot of actors whom I was unfamiliar with, but interestingly enough, it was great to have Keith Poulsen in the film. I saw him in the trailer and I said, oh, that's great, Keith Poulsen. I've talked about him a whole bunch lately, and so many films as of late, a lot of the mumblecore stuff, and then he was in, of course, talking about like like Francis Ferguson, and Somebody Up There Likes Me, the Bob Byington films, and Between the Temples from Aaron Katz. So, and he's good. He blends in well with the other actors in this, but some of the other actors in this, the voice of Frederick Wiseman, which was great to see him in the opening credits. You have interestingly enough, you have Keith William Richards, who was in Uncut Gems. He was the one who was kind of really going after Adam Sandler in that film, and Wayne Diamond in the film, who has a small role. He was also in Uncut Gems. He is at the one talking to Julia Fox at the end of the film. If you see him, you know who he was, but yeah, it's just a great look, just some of these characters just hanging out. There's not a lot of, there's a lot of there's a lot of jokes in the film, but it's not overly comedic and it's not overly like set up and punchline. It's a lot of just little comments that people make, that the characters make. It's a lot of just repetitive sort of discussions about where they're going to go on from here. Some of them have more opportunities than others, but it's just a great kind of ensemble movie. It's a great kind of warm film, and it was interesting kind of looking up the where this was filmed, and I think part of the reason why I think I connected with the film so much because I didn't really play sports growing up. I was never really a big sports guy. I really didn't get into sports until later, and even now I'm far more of a casual sort of football fan. I really couldn't tell you. It's one of these things where it's like my bread and butter is films, man. I have no time or interest for other sort of diving deep into into these other kind of topics. So I'm sure if I spent all day, I could tell you a whole bunch of facts about football, but I'm just a casual fan. I just casually watch it. I have no investment truly besides just supporting my team. And if they do, great, great. If they don't, well, then I ain't losing any sleep over that, man. But what was I gonna say? The reason why I feel almost feels like very connected with this film, for one, it's filmed in Massachusetts, and I was curious as to where this was actually filmed at Soldiers Field, like where exactly the location was. And I was interested to find that it was filmed fairly close by. I mean, so to speak, about an hour or so away. But something about the light that's painting the trees and the leaves, and just that Sunday kind of feeling of just you got to go to work, you got to go to school tomorrow, but sort of like that last grasp of the weekend, being with people whom you enjoy being around, and it's sort of like there's every day of the week has its own feel, and I think Sunday has such a unique feeling. And I'm watching the film, I'm getting my own kind of feeling of nostalgia, not even from the film itself, but just some of the shots, the way that you just hear the lawnmower going in the background, you can almost like smell the grass on here, and it's just a really warm feeling, man. I mean, this is like total cozy cinema right here, and it's one that I think you kind of have to let sit with you because. If you're looking for anything more than a hangout film in terms of any kind of big plots, structure, any kind of big sort of event that, well, this is the end of our, the baseball field, and I'm going to remember when you get to this, we did that. It's very unsentimental with that. There are some films I feel that I can't quite connect to because they get so sentimental and they get so, buried in nostalgia. There's a couple of like big like famous films that I've been able to fully connect to because of that reason. Where I think it's a bit too sentimental. It's a bit too just gushing the nostalgia, trying to gush nostalgia in a way that I feel kind of feels insincere. This isn't a film where a character is looking back on this time in the 90s, when this field, but the day before the field went under, it feels just kind of more so about like almost in a way nostalgic seeing the film where you're like, yeah, in the moment you really kind of take it for granted, but then at the same time you're like, no, I actually really enjoyed spending time with these characters in the situation. It really kind of made me appreciate, these simple kind of conversations, these simple kind of remarks that maybe, in your own life you don't really think about, but how many times in your life do you think back to, times that were so much that were so-called better, but it really is just kind of time that's gone. We think about the past as some sort of like the good and the bad, and we think about like, oh man, we should return that way. I don't feel that way at all, man. I'm very much of the mindset of the past is gone, nothing you can do about that. I can only focus on now and today, man. But still, kind of that feeling of just like, man, remember when we did this and we did that, and that's what the film kind of, thankfully, avoids. It's just a good, solid comedy drama, a solid hangout movie. It's one that, I think it's easy to kind of compare it to, like I said, something like an early John Sayles film. I mean, because Sayles is making so many different kinds of films throughout his career, but or even I guess you could say like Richard Linklater in a way, a little bit of like that Slacker kind of vibe, but not quite as quirky of characters as that. Slacker is a feel in and of itself where you have so many different types of characters in that, and that film is going for something so much more different than this is. But you can imagine kind of somebody like Richard Linklater being a fan of something like this. But just a really solid film overall. It's one of my favorite things I've seen this year so far, which is crazy to say. It's only March, but I'm sure when you're listening to this, it's well, if you're listening to this when it's new, probably April or however long in the future. But But good stuff overall. I really enjoyed this film, and it's one that I think is going to really grow on repeated, maybe not repeated viewings, but the more that it kind of lingers and the more that it kind of stays in the general sort of consensus, whether or not that be to yourself or through recommending it or talking about it with others, is it will either come or go. But really good stuff nonetheless. I really enjoyed this film, and on I guys funny I said I was going to talk about that briefly, and here I am even a whole sort of half the episode about that. But let's talk. Don't even know if I'm going to say briefly or not, because I say that and then I never end up talking about it briefly. But let's talk about a famous book I'm just about finishing up, but I figured I'd give it a talk anyways. And I'm going to get another sip of this beverage right here, and we are going to look at a book from Stephen Bach. When this was originally published in, it says 1999, but I think there has been a newer forward. I mean, at least the edition that I have, the version that I have, it has a forward in it, and I don't have the book with me to tell you when that copyright was. What you want to do is keep an eye out on the copyright on these books. But talking about Final Cut, Art, Money, and Ego in the Making of Heaven's Gate, the film that sank United Artists. And I talk about this because a little while ago I read the book on the life and career of Michael Cimino, written by Charles Elton. That book came out in 2022, and that book was called Cimino, The Deer Hunter, Heaven's Gate, and The Price of a Vision. I've talked about Heaven's Gate on the show a long time ago, a couple of years ago at least, but Michael Cimino famously directs Thunderbolt and Lightfoot with Clint Eastwood and Jeff Bridges, ends up directing The Deer Hunter, and wins Best Picture. And at that time, having this sort of free reign, is able to, I mean, free reign to a certain extent, to get his next project, Heaven's Gate, originally called the Johnson County War, off the ground, and the disaster production behind that, and what would lead to the eventual downfall of the studio United Artists, a staple of film studios since the 1920s, put together by actors like Charles Chaplin and Mary Pickford. And Final Cut's just a great look at at this whole time about where United Artists was at this point, sort of the as many successes as they had, but still not being able to really kind of keep afloat. And sort of, it's funny, one of the points in the book that was mentioned is sort of the ridiculousness of how much a film has to gross in order to not only make a profit, but to break even. We hear about that now. Budgets for films are ballooning to hundreds of millions of dollars, on just films that have to make some crazy number back. And how often do they really do that? You have one success, or you have one or two that do well, or good, and then they sort of try to emulate that again and again. And how often, even the titans, I guess, of current Hollywood sort of movies, at some point is going to fall. The stars on that are basically not bound to stay up forever. Whether it be superhero movies or certain franchise movies, at some point, I think there's going to be waning returns. And for a thing like, for a case like United Artists, you have these films that, they have their franchises. They're going through the Rocky films, but then you also have, interestingly enough, how successful the Woody Allen films were for United Artists, so much so that he basically had complete and total free reign in the company to do anything he wanted, so much so that, I wish I remember the name of the film they had mentioned. I'm going to try to find it while I talk here, and if I can't, then I won't go through with it, but there was one film that they had given him complete carte blanche on, where it didn't matter if it did well or it didn't. It was more of the ability to experiment and to try something else to further his creative sort of autonomy, essentially. And I want to see if I can actually find the name of the film. If not, then I'm not going to bother with it, because I have the list up right here. And I think it was Interiors. Yeah, it had to have been from 1978. That was the one, more of a drama than anything. That stars Diane Keaton, Geraldine Page, and Kristen Griffith. And I have not seen that one. Woody Allen is such a fascinating filmmaker in the amount of films that he has because I've seen, I would say, maybe half of his directed films. I'm actually kind of curious. There's a lot here I haven't seen, but just for fun, let's just go through them because why not? I haven't seen many of his recent ones, so I do have to say, but just for fun, I'm curious to see what I've seen. Let's see. Go with features only. What's Up, Tiger Lily? I've not seen. Take the Money and Run. I've seen. Bananas. I've seen. Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex. I've not seen. Sleeper. I think I've seen. Love and Death. I've not seen. Annie Hall. I've seen. Interiors. I've not seen. Manhattan. I have seen. Stardust Memories. I've seen. Midsummer's Night Sex Comedy. I've not seen. Zelig. I have not seen. Broadway. Danny Rose. I've not seen. Pearl Rose of Cairo. I've seen. Hannah and Her Sisters I've seen, Radio Days I've seen, September I've not seen, Another Woman I've not seen, Crimes and Misdemeanors I've seen, Alice I've seen, Shadows and Fog I've not seen, Husbands and Wives I've seen, Manhattan Murder Mystery I've seen, Bullets Over Broadway I've not seen, Mighty Aphrodite I've seen, Everyone Says I Love You I've not seen, Deconstructing Harry I've seen, Celebrity I've seen, Sweet and Lowdown I've not seen, Small Time Crooks I don't think I've seen, Curse of Jade Scorpion, I've not seen. Hollywood Ending, I've seen. Anything Else, I've not seen. Melinda and Melinda, I've not seen. Match Point, I've seen. Scoop, I've not seen. Cassandra's Dream, I've seen. Vicky Cristina Barcelona, I've seen. Whatever Works, I've seen. You Will Meet a Tall, Dark Stranger, I've not seen. Midnight in Paris, I've seen. To Rome with Love, I've seen. And Blue Jasmine I've seen. And then the next handful I've not seen, which is Magic in the Moonlight, Irrational Man, Cafe Society, Wonder Wheel, A Rainy Day in New York, Rifkin's Festival, and Coup de Chance. I don't know why I didn't actually see all those. I think it always kind of felt like every other movie was like something kind of interesting. It's like, it has like After Blue Jasmine, which was good. And then it was like, I remember Magic in the Moonlight. I'm like, I saw the trailer for it. I'm like, eh. But then even Irrational Man, I was like, I don't know about this one. And then the later of them I've not seen. I don't know why I haven't seen his film since. But I guess that's probably the biggest dent in his filmography that I haven't seen. So, you can do the math on how many I've actually seen. Actually, on Letterboxd, I can see how many I've seen. Isn't this riveting conversation, me figuring out how many Woody Allen movies I've seen? How many times have I said the word seen and not seen? I don't know how. Okay, so this is more than just his features, but it says I've seen 19 out of 57, if that is correct, which it is not, because I already see here that there are some films that I haven't put down, or I haven't listed that I've seen. Aren't you guys thrilled at me figuring this out? Because I know I am. Okay. I've seen. Okay, did I say I have not seen Sweet and Lowdown? Because I did. Just to let you know, if you're dying to know, hey man, did you actually see Sweet and Lowdown? Well, you better believe I've seen it. Okay, so it's actually about 22 films of his I've seen. Anyways, how the hell did we get on that topic? Final Cut. Anyways, yeah, so Woody Allen has complete autonomy to do whatever he really wanted to at that point. And the writer, Stephen Bach, him being, let me get this here, him being sort of, when Manhattan was coming out, he was so taken aback by the quality of that film. He loved the film, and he was saying this is the best film of this era. And Manhattan is a great film. I have not seen it in some time, but I remember always being a fan of Manhattan. That's just one of Woody Allen's strongest films, unquestionably. But yeah, sort of just the frustration, sort of the art versus commerce sort of thing, and both sides, being having their push and pull. Michael Cimino being unnecessarily difficult to work with at times. United Artists being a little, what's the word I'm looking for? They're being a little stingy with some of their decision making. A lot of it's being held up. So you can understand the frustration of both sides. And ultimately, I think this all would have been moot. And the book brings this up as well, is if it had been a great success. If it had been either a critical or financial success. much in the same way that Apocalypse Now which also had a very troubled production, but ends up winning the Palme d'Or that year. Ends up becoming this just almost universally praised masterpiece. I think actually Apocalypse Now tied the Palme d'Or that year with oh my gosh, not was it not the Tin Drum? Was it? Yes, I'm sorry. It was a Tin Drum by Volker Schlondorf. I remember that was the one. That was one of the years that had more than one winner. But just sort of United Artists being like, okay, if we can get another Apocalypse Now in our hands, then this will all have been worth it. And as time told us, it was not. I mean, Heaven's Gate in and of itself is such a fascinating film, but it is also difficult to watch without the entire context behind it. Whereas Apocalypse Now, I think, has been able to triumph over its notorious production because of how strong of a film it is. How it is in the conversation of the great films of the 20th century. One of the truly top great war films. Coppola just having that 10-year streak of releasing four masterpieces consecutively is sort of insane in terms of the quality on each, the unique quality on each of them. How all four of those films, The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part Two, and Apocalypse Now, are all uniquely masterful for different reasons. But no, it's a fascinating book. It goes great with that Cimino book I talked about, and both books argue that while Heaven's Gate wasn't the death knell in United Artists as it's so often attributed to, it is still a matter of fact that it was a definite big turning point for the turning of filmmaker-driven films in America at that time. The age of the new Hollywood was over for myriad reasons. I mean, you're also getting blockbusters like Jaws and Star Wars, and famously I talked about before with like something like Sorcerer getting lost in the shuffle because it comes out the same weekend as Star Wars, and ultimately never quite got the I guess sort of general sort of attention that it may have received without being put against Star Wars. I think film fans are fully aware of fully aware not only of Sorcerer but of the quality of that film, of how it's one of Friedkin's one of his very strongest films. One of the strongest films of the 70s, unquestionably, but also just the fact of the matter is that if you ask the general public, Sorcerer, because it's such an on ubiquitous name, they don't know the wages of fear, they don't know what sorcerer means, they think it's like a sword and sorcerer, and but anyways, kind of trailed off a bit there. But it's a solid quality book. It goes really in depth with a lot of the decision making because we are looking at this from United Artists' point of view. A lot of what's happening on the Heaven's Gate set is coming back to them. They're finding out that certain things are just not being done. They get the dailies back and they look amazing, and it's sort of like that's almost enough for them to kind of justify the rate at which production is going. And the double-edged sword of that, because the money that is being burnt through to get about a minute or so of usable footage a day, and you want to make this grandiose film, you can see both sides of it, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's sort of like the fact that they were willing to kind of drop the project, so to speak, and how bad that would look and then Warner Brothers would maybe come and pick it up or something like that. Sort of all these things that had to happen for this sort of film to be made, and for United Artists to kind of take the fall on it as much as Cimino, because Cimino's career was effectively over after this point. He did films after this, of course, but it's in the same way where it's very much the post Heaven's Gate films, which is the rest of his filmography, because he only had a couple of credits before this. I mean, he did work on like Silent Running with Bruce Dern, but definitely any time you would put out a film after Heaven's Gate would have to be in the shadow of Heaven's Gate, and sort of what that would entail. But quality book's a famous book. It's talked about, it's known, so it's by no means an obscurity, but keep in mind, should you think you're interested in the topic, it is definitely worth your time and worth reading. But that's going to be it for this one. So didn't get to everything I was going to talk about, but that's all right. I never do, and there's always next time. So thank you guys for listening so much. yet again, take care. Make sure you're prioritizing yourself and your work and getting the job done, because no one's going to do it for you. So take care. I'm going to finish this Dr. Pepper, and I will be back next time. Thank you so much.